Mics are hot.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the NESN studios. Michaela Vernava here along with Matt Chatham. You're watching the NESN pregame chat, and the Patriots getting ready to take on the Jets in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
They are.
Matt, tough to pick on this team that's leading the league in scoring, but the Patriots offense does have its obstacles to overcome right now. Let's break it down into their offensive personnel groups. Josh Gordon out.
Yeah.
Philip Dorsett banged up. Gunnar Olszewski banged up. So as far as the wide receivers go tonight, could we see a little bit more from Jacoby Myers, perhaps?
Yeah, so the way I look at this, Michaela, is this is a different kind of game. When you have issues, this goes out through any season, any NFL year, you're going to get 16 games. All 16 aren't sort of the ideal version of you. A lot of times it's sort of manipulating a game plan based upon the personnel that you have available. So with the Patriots having an issue going on at wide receiver, we're no Josh, and the idea that Rex Burkhead's out as well, I know that's another position group, but I do think it impacts who you use at wide receiver. And because we all know the N'Keal Harry thing is still a couple weeks away. In the absence of those two pieces plus the back, I think that you want to shy away from situations where you get to Gunnar Olszewski, who you mentioned. I mean, you shy away from the third and fourth receiver sets. I think sometimes there's that mentality out there that, hey, you've got such and such guy down, therefore everyone slides up a spot. How good or how strong are your groups that would still encompass those same four people? No, I think sometimes what you do is you go to more three groups than four, right? Or if you're normally a three receiver thing and you lose your third, maybe slide to more two receiver sets and you don't see as many of those. So Edelman is tremendous. He's going to be, he's a baller. He's going to go out there and probably catch 8 to 10 balls tonight. I think you can pretty much put that in the bank. I think we're going to see Philip Dorsett, but I think the fear here of knowing that Philip is back for the first time, even with the extended sort of amount of time, the 11 days that they have between this and the last one, I think there would be the temptation to go out there and run Philip all of Josh's reps, but he's coming off a soft tissue thing. The last thing you want to do is go re-injure him. So I think you work as if you have more of the two receiver stuff. And when you do and so what that would mean is back to the original thing about Jacoby, it could be some Jacoby, it could be some Philip. But I don't think you worry about who your fourth receiver is because you stay out of that stuff unless you absolutely have to get in it. 2 minutes, they'll be into it. Spread stuff. If they happen to trail, you'll get into that kind of stuff. But I think this can be a two wide receiver offense tonight, which isn't what we're used to seeing. And why is that available? I know we're going to talk about it later, but because they made the transaction at tight ends. They have two new dudes who could be on the field. And when you have those two guys on the field with you, you only need two other receivers if you're a single back team. So there's sort of ways to move the chess pieces around so that there isn't the same strain. There would be the same strain if you wanted to go, oh, well, we still have to be a 4 or 5 wide receiver team. Well, you can't do that if you're a little banged up at that spot.
Well, one of those new guys at tight end, Ben Watson, Tom Brady certainly seems happy to have a veteran like him in the lineup. How much do you actually expect him to be able to contribute tonight?
Ben is a wonder kid. He's a really bright guy, so the mental aspect you would never worry about. I mean, granted, Ben has a history with his team. He was drafted while I was still here, so he's not quite as old as I am, but he's an older player. So it's a miracle that he's still out there playing as he is. But he's a physical phenom. He's the kind of guy who, physically, you don't worry about him getting up to speed quickly. He had the time off with the suspension. You have no concerns that his body is right when he arrives. If they're willing to practice him, they're willing to play him as much as they need to. The second component of that is the mental part that I talked about off the front, and I think that's really important because even though he was here years ago, and that's others. Charlie Weiss is your other coordinators. He's been through Billy, I believe. But the idea that he's back in the system doesn't necessarily mean it's complete matching up verbiage, but he did that this summer. So he's just such an experienced pro. I think there would be no issue if you walked in and felt like he could physically handle it for him to go out and have 40 to maybe even 50 snaps. But what I think buffers that decision is that it wasn't a one tight end transaction. We know Ryan Izzo's down because he had the concussion in week. Matt Lacoste is still injured, presumably, and not a part of this. They made the move for Eric Tomlinson, and Eric Tomlinson is a name that, if we were doing 10 stories of this week of Jets, Patriots, Monday Night Football, Eric Tomlinson is not the big story. But Eric Tomlinson should be, because Eric Tomlinson, if it hadn't been him, they needed someone like him. And what that is a 6'6", almost 270-pound tight end. These are sort of the quasi-offensive tackles. It's just barely a notch below a tackle. He's there to block. And I think when you take someone who's an experienced pro, by the way, he started 12 games a year ago for the Jets, but he's someone who can walk in and pick up a blocking scheme, which if you're an end-of-the-line guy and you're working in concert with a tackle, and maybe you're working with another tight end and Ben, I think that's something that you can come off the street and with a few days of practice pick up enough if you're an experienced pro. I think the stuff that gets tough is when receivers come in off the thing or come off the street, or a linebacker that's got to pick up all the coverages. There's some positions where it's a little tougher. If your job is blocking, there's not nearly as much to it as an end-of-the-line player. It gets more complex if they want to involve Tomlinson in the pass stuff, but I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. But the idea that you have two experienced pros who can walk in and hopefully either man together or individually throughout the course of the game, that end-of-the-line spot, I think it opens up all the other stuff. So I would expect that those two will be a big part of today's game plan. And then because it's the Patriots, I'll also expect that I'm dead wrong because they like to change things on us, and that's kind of their deal.
All right, well, let's also look a little bit at what we'll see on the ground. You've already mentioned Rex Burkhead out tonight. We have seen a lot more of Brandon Bolden showcased so far this season than I certainly would have expected. He's been doing pretty well. Are we seeing so much of him because he's doing well? Is it a product of several injuries among that running back core, or is it a lack of trust in Sony Michel?
It's been sort of a week-to-week thing, Michaela, and another element to this that we don't know as we're taping, we're doing the show right now live for you guys at 6 o'clock, but as this thing gets closer and you get the inactive list, we'll find out if Harris from Alabama, the rookie, is going to be involved. Damien Harris, he gets involved, and to me that answers some of that Bolden usage question, right? And this is a really big opportunity for the young guy. I mean, he was drafted onto a team that had a loaded room. I mean, you have a guy like Brandon Bolden who's making really nice money as the special teams guy who can come in a pinch, and then a guy like Rex Burkhead who's well compensated, who looked tremendous when he played. But in 2 years here, Rex Burkhead, as I believe 2 years ago, he had 8 games in the season, and then last year 10. So he's not a full docket guy. He's not going to go wire to wire for you. So, but even in saying that, then it's Sony Michel and James White. It's just so hard to get to game day on this roster. And if you're Harris, you're thrilled that you were drafted by the Patriots, winning team, winning culture, going to be probably in the playoffs every year of my career if I stick here. But it's a really hard game day roster to crack. So I think there's a small little opening there. We'll see if they make a decision. But the question on whether or not Bolden will take carries from Sony, it goes into whether or not I think they're willing to bring the young guy up. If they're not, then we're back to the kinds of runs they do, and that they don't have a fullback anymore. We know that Jakob Johnson's gone. He was put down on IR this week with the shoulder injury. We obviously know James Devlin's not there. So that's another way that this Tomlinson addition at tight end really matters, because he's kind of your fullback too. Either him or Ben's, if they want to run two-back runs, which is where you see Sony, somebody's got to be on the field with them. Otherwise, we're talking single back runs, which could be the shotgun stuff, which is more draw. That's really more James's world. So if for some reason they've just said, we don't have a fullback right now, and we're not comfortable with a 38-year-old guy in Ben, even though he's a dog and he can get in there and do it, we really want him doing fullback collisions his first day back into football over and over for 40 reps. If they decide, hey, that's not what we're going to do, I think that could really cut in to the Sony Michel usage. If they're saying, okay, that's not quite what we have. And in saying that, I think Brandon has shown that he can handle the gun runs a little better than Sony. He's a little more initial burst explosive, where Sony's really read the puzzle, get out and burst on the other side. Brandon has a suddenness to get away from bad plays better than Sony does. Sony has a real bad habit of sort of being like a roller coaster runner. Good play, bad play, good play, bad play. And sometimes he just runs into tackles. But he's a guy that needs a fullback and or a certain scheme of really great edge blocking. And if by chance Ben Watson and Tomlinson work together and we have great edges, well, then maybe you see Sony back. But until that point, I'm actually sort of hedging and thinking this might be a big James White night.
Well, the Patriots' defense has certainly not been a roller coaster whatsoever. They have been consistently solid. Tom Brady even admitted in an interview with ESPN, if he had to chalk this season and the success so far up to one word, he said it was defense, which coming from him says a lot. But I mean, the defense is speaking for itself. How much is Gerard Mayo's role playing a part in this?
I don't know that, but I would never hesitate to give him credit. I think he's a brilliant guy. He's a really smart dude. You're not going to come around many players that understood the game as he does. And we're dovetailing. Gerard was here right when I left. So when I was in New York those 3 years, Gerard, I believe, trailed by a year or two from then. And I've more gotten to know him off the field. And I just know he's like a really bright, really astute guy, non-football stuff as well as football stuff. And the simple fact that his role came into be whatever the heck it is so quickly. I just know from Bill's system and some other teammates of mine, former teammates of mine, that have tried to go into coaching and have sort of worked their way up through the system in this organization, other ones around the country. They don't necessarily get that gig right away. That's a rarity to just go right to that spot and have the kind of responsibilities. Is Gerard calling the plays? We don't really know that. Is Gerard having a heavy hand sort of in game planning? We kind of don't know that either. We do know from some of the commentary from some of the other linebackers that he's pretty hands-on as far as talking sort of individual technique and sort of shooting the, I was going to swear, can't do that. Shooting the S, whatever, with the guys in the locker room and kind of busting balls and things like that about mistakes they make. So he's sort of that bridge between player and scheme. So I think he's been a tremendous asset. Do I know that like all the play call stuff on a percentage basis of rushing and pressures and coverages they choose, is that because Gerard's there now? We kind of don't know that, but I think they like that sort of cloudiness. I think they want you guessing, is it Bill or is it maybe his son? Is that Steve Belichick with more of a hands-on part on that? We don't know, and they don't want you to know.
Well, tonight, Michael Bennett out of the lineup, serving that 1 week suspension. How much of an impact do you think that will have on the Patriots team?
Well, he's a great player, and he's done a great job for the Patriots, albeit on a low rep count. So I understand that this thing happened. I feel like 3 weeks from now we'll go, oh yeah, you remember that week that he was? I mean, because let's think of it. Hightower's missed games. Hightower's missed a game so far. It didn't seem to affect the defense, and Hightower's a great player. There was the Patrick Chung missed a week, and we're like, oh shoot, Patrick wasn't here. And Patrick is a great player for this team. And I kind of feel, and those guys are guys that are much higher rep counts than Michael has been. I think there's going to come a period during the season where they're really going to need Michael. One thing the Patriots haven't been in this year, other than that Buffalo game, is a really competitive wire-to-wire, and Buffalo still doesn't quite qualify there, but a wire-to-wire, one possession game throughout the entire thing, or one score game where it's just back and forth, back and forth. In those kind of games, a guy like his rep count will go up, but when they keep getting up on teams, and it doesn't appear that he had sort of the lead role as far as the interior big rush scheme guy. That's been Adam Butler. So Adam's had like a really nice bump in his career. They feel comfortable using him more. They rarely put Danny Shelton and Guy on the field together once those leads happen. They're kind of the big dudes that stop runs initially, and then they transition to those other guys. So what I imagine the absence of Bennett today will just mean is Adam Butler's numbers will be up, and the two big dudes will be out there minus Bennett in regular defense. But we got to remember, this is a defense that's made up mostly of mid-sized guys. This is the Jamie Collins and the Hightowers and the Van Noys and John Simons, and then the next wave, Jawan Bentley, and then a Landon Roberts, and they cycle through that group to make up most of their fronts. They sprinkle in the bigs, and Michael had sort of found himself in a little sort of no man's land. But again, I would say, provided the personal relationship and the locker room stuff gets swept away, we're going to be sitting here in late November and December, and he's going to be logging 25 to 30 snaps and a big part of it all.
Well, as far as the Jets go, aside from the obvious Sam Darnold being out when the Patriots first faced them in Week 3, 30-14, what else is different about this Jets team that they're seeing tonight?
Well, I would say, Michaela, this is we do this every year, right? We always have these division teams that you see twice, and usually we're like, oh, it's so much different this time, and usually that's because of one or two guys. This is one of the more dramatic ones I recall, because it's not just 5 guys difference in the last time. It's which 5. And in this situation, you have Mosley on the other side at the linebacker spot. It's one of the highest paid linebackers in football who missed that game as well. So it's easy to go to Darnold, the quarterback. It's going to be a massive difference. But you not only have the quarterback who's now there, who's markedly different. You got to see Luke Falk, because Luke was the Simeon was injured the week before. They had to pull a guy up off practice squad to play that game. The Patriots scored on the very first 3 drives, and the Jets punted on their very first 3. It was 21-0 before anyone had even sneezed. So that game was not competitive. It got up to 30-0. We were seeing Stidham series in the second half. We were seeing drop punts. I mean, that game will be an outlier to tonight. Even if the Patriots win comfortably tonight, you're facing a different crew. So back to the list. Obviously, you have Sam Darnold. You have Mosley, as I said, C.J. Mosley at the linebacker spot. So you have like a middle of the defense leader guy, obviously the leader on the offense. And then Quinnen Williams, the 3rd overall pick. So if you're the Jets, looking at who you were a year ago, you're expecting this giant bump from Darnold. You're using huge draft equity to get us another monster piece on the front. You're spending your big free agent dollar at the middle linebacker spot, and you're going to spend all that free agent money at the back spot with Le'Veon Bell. So Le'Veon's been back where they're just languishing because he's getting killed because the offensive line hasn't played real well. So I think, and they've been pretty banged up themselves. So the differences, or there's sort of myriad of them. There's a lot of different stuff going on. Also, even old friend Demaryius Thomas is there, and I think he's a nice add-in as well. So what has not changed, I think, is really the story, how this thing will be decided. I know the story is who's new that wasn't there the last time, but I think it's very, very important to understand that the offensive line is essentially the same. And the offensive line for the Jets is really banged up. And that's where the matchup lies. Hey, we got Sam back, but you still have a lot of the same issues up front. And it's that front, that offensive line that's got to handle the defensive front of the Patriots. And Darnold, much better player, clearly, than the guy that was there for him. But I think the problem still exists because the issue in front of him is still a pretty dramatic mismatch for the Pats.
Well, looking at the quarterback specifically, though, what are Darnold's greatest strengths? We did see him pull off a good win over the Cowboys, definitely a confidence booster. But what will the Pats throw at him that the Cowboys did not?
So one of the things he has a bad habit of doing, and it's not to knock Sam, and I'll put this out here in the front. You guys know by profile, I'm not a hot taker. I'm not big into the crazy hyperbole stuff and predictions and future BS stuff, but I would say that from what little I've seen of Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield, I could say with each of the guys, I've probably studied 5 to 10 games total for each of them, a little more or less for each one. I think Darnold's the best of the 3 thus far. I think Darnold's the one that looks like he has the fewest issues. So Josh Allen is crazy. He can throw the ball clean over the mountain, but he can, he can do that when he's trying to throw a 5-yard end cut. He also can scramble like crazy and get himself knocked out. But Darnold is a little more refined, but he actually has the ability to take off the front porch. We've been using that all year here on the NESN pregame chat. The front porch, the area directly in front of him. What Darnold does a little better job, he's a little more refined than I think even Baker Mayfield, I'm talking same draft class here, is just identifying the easy play. If you're just going to run up the field past him, he'll step forward and get 5. And he had a 20. Well, the Patriots blew them out in Week 17 a year ago, so Darnold did get to face the Jets. It was a bloodbath, but he took off for a 28-yarder in that game and for a big gainer. He did it a week ago against the Cowboys, so he's not a scramble guy like Allen necessarily. But if you leave it, he'll take it, and he's got a little more burst than I think people realize. What he does better, I think more refined than the other 2 guys, is reset his feet in the pocket and still keep his eyes downfield. So he's not a bad ball. This isn't like the Mahomes stuff and throwing it behind his head. It's not like an over-the-top athletic guy. He's still a pretty pocket guy, but he shifts, resets, and keeps his eye downfield. So he kind of has like a pro guy feel. The one thing I'll say where his biggest vulnerability still is, and he had a deep red zone pick against the Cowboys. It wasn't a completely clean game for him. He has a habit of staring at the rush. And the Patriots rush is confusing as all hell, folks. I mean, it would be great for a fan, great for Michaela here to sit in a pocket just once and see which guy's coming, which guy's not. And you can tell that when he senses, you see Darnold watch the rush as some of his open receivers are there low. Ryan Griffin, tight ends that sit low. He doesn't have Chris Herndon. He's still injured. That was the highly touted guy from Miami a year ago, a tight end that they just haven't had. He was suspended, but then isn't back yet from injury. But the point of this is, in those moments where, like Peyton Manning's, like the really, really refined guys, obviously like Brady, that aren't bothered by that, Darnold is still bothered by that. You can see, here it comes, and he loses his downfield eyes. So I think this is still a guy, it's not going to quite be the Josh Allen, get 3 picks, completely blow him out of the water kind of thing, but I do feel like he's a multi-turnover guy waiting to happen. So I'm sure the Patriots watch that film this week and they're ready to pounce.
Well, then looking at the other side of the ball, Greg Williams put a lot of pressure on the Cowboys. They came up with a sack, 8 quarterback hits. What do you think he will roll out against the Pats that's different than what they faced in Week 3 in that first game?
Yeah, this is always where it's tough, Michaela, and this is why, when we were playing, even when, the few years I was down in New York myself, when you get blown out by the Patriots in one game and you get a chance to come back and play them again, you often switch your script dramatically so. I've known that from this side and from that side looking back, and I think Greg Williams, although he had that luck against, not luck, but the good fortune against the Cowboys, he blitzed like crazy. So he sent not just the 5th guy, but the 6th guy almost every time that Dak Prescott was in 3rd and 4, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 9. There were all sorts of different scenarios where not only the 5th guy's come up with the 6 as well. He's going to leave them hang out basically on the premise that I'm going to get to you before you can get rid of it, right? We recall several weeks back, it was kind of the one big thing that made Greg pull back a little bit. The horses, they had the one quick slant to OBJ in the Cleveland game, and OBJ went for like 67 yards or whatever, and he came out publicly and was like, well, I didn't need a blitz, and I'm just going to sit back and be fine, and we'll make him go the long, hard way. He went crazy against Dak and the Cowboys, but that's usually a recipe for disaster with the Patriots. You want to get home with 4, 5's okay. Part of it, I think, will be predicated on whether or not he can stop the run game. If he feels like he's stopped the run game and he's put Tom in 3rd and 8, if he's put Tom in 3rd and 10 plus, God forbid, then that does change it, because I think you can then rush to get it out of Tom's hand quickly to get the 4 or 5 yard pass and tackle and get off the field. But you're not going to rattle Tom by bringing the 6th person, because he kind of wants that. He wants you to bring people out of coverage. He's going to throw it quick anyway. He's going to throw it quick if you bring 4. He's going to throw it quick if you bring 6. So I think Greg Williams is probably here a little bit between a rock and a hard place. The best thing that he can possibly do is, it's not necessarily approach on pass plays. It's negate the run. Negate the run and make them all pass plays, and then it really sort of opens the cupboard for you.
All right, well, we have our Patriots beat writers, Doug Kyde and Zach Cox, in the Meadowlands, so let's now check in with those guys.
Thanks, guys. Beautiful day here in East Rutherford, New Jersey. We've got some Ramones blaring through the stadium right now. Hopefully you guys can't hear that too loudly right now. But, Zach, Patriots-Giants and Patriots-Jets today, who's the player that you're specifically looking at to be watching in this game to have a big game or a big performance or a necessary performance?
The guy that I'm going to be watching is Ben Watson, the tight end who's finally making his kind of Patriots return in this game after he was suspended and then cut and then re-signed. Now he's back, and I thought that even if the Patriots' other tight ends were fully healthy in this game, there was a pretty good chance that Ben Watson would be the Patriots' #1 tight end. Now, Matt LaCosse is hurt, Ryan Izzo's hurt, so almost by default, Ben Watson is that #1 guy, and I think you could see him be pretty involved in this game because it's clear that Tom Brady trusts Ben Watson. It's clear that Tom Brady, when Ben Watson was cut, it was clear that Tom Brady was not particularly happy, so I think I could definitely see a situation where he tries to get Ben Watson involved early in this game and try to up this tight end group, which really hasn't been that big of a factor in the passing game so far this season. Also interested to see what we see from former Jet Eric Tomlinson. Yep. He should be active for this game. Interested to see how they use him. Who's your #1 guy here?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Ryan Izzo and Matt LaCosse are both out of this game. Wide receiver Josh Gordon also out. Running back Rex Burkhead out. So someone has to catch passes from Tom Brady. You mentioned a good one right there in Ben Watson. My guy's going to be Jacoby Myers because Philip Dorsett is coming off of an injury. He's coming off a hamstring injury. Julian Edelman's coming off of a chest injury. So both of those guys are pretty banged up in there. Jacoby Myers is going to be that #3 wide receiver. One other note on that is that Dorsett hasn't been great when he's been counted on to be the Patriots' either #1 or #2 wide receiver. In this game with Gordon out, Dorsett's probably going to be that #2. He's going to draw some better cornerbacks, and I don't expect him to have a major game right here. So I do think that Myers could be one who really breaks out. He had a good performance last week when the Patriots were forced to count on him and Gunnar Olszewski behind Julian Edelman on the wide receiver depth chart. So I could see another 4, 5, 6 catch performance from Jacoby Myers, and he kind of needs to get this offense moving because Tom Brady's offensive weapons are very limited, as I mentioned. Edelman, Myers, Dorsett, Watson, Eric Tomlinson, Sony Michel, James White, Brandon Bolden. So we'll see how the Patriots move the ball, but I definitely do expect Jacoby Myers to get a fair share of targets. And if he can become a dependable option for Tom Brady, then maybe his role will just increase as the season goes along. Let's send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, thanks, guys. Matt, it's time now for your keys to the game. Let's start with your offensive key. What is it?
This is going to sound kind of predicty, but I just think this is a really important night for the backs to have a big game. I think it's kind of all about the backs, quite frankly. If in the event you have sort of a muted night from James White, You don't get a lot of production from Sony. If it just happens to be one of those nights, I think that puts a tremendous amount of stress on the offense because, you're a little thinned in other spots. And you got new dudes at tight end and all those things. So I think one of the ways to really relieve that pressure early is establish the run. I know people hate that phrase, but do it. Actually do this. Commit to it early. Live with long drives that maybe end in field goals. Get those first few things going, because I think it's folly if you end up, just with like 8 pass attempts to receivers real quickly and you're in and out trying to figure things out on the sideline. So I think it's really, really incumbent upon the Patriots offense to go out of their way to make sure James is super involved. He could have a 15, 17 touch kind of day. Could be his pass, could be a running game. But Sony, you don't want to see weeds growing on him on the sideline. You want to see him used, and that can be passing game as well. The cool thing the Patriots have done, even though the running game itself has been up and down in the last several weeks, is they have shown a willingness to flex Sony out and put him out as a strictly receiver. So it'll be interesting to see if you maybe see Sony and James in there together. I guess my notion here is I don't know if it's a key to winning necessarily, but I think it really lubricates things, makes it a little easier for the group if those two have a big game. And in the absence of a big game or a speed bump from either of the two, Brandon Bolden is there to jump right in. So I'm looking for a big game from those three.
All right, and how about a defensive key?
Yeah, so defensively, I think the biggest mismatch in this game, if you go position group, like entire thing, all the different special teams groups against one another, the secondary of the Jets against the Patriots receiver group, and then flip that, the other side against one another. I think the biggest mismatch is actually the Patriots defensive line, and I kind of include the ends in that, which are some of your outside linebackers, against this Jets offensive line. Asimile, guard banged up, Beachum, tackle banged up. They had basically everyone that's on that offensive line has at some point here been a part of the injury report. There were a ton of question marks for them, and a lot of them aren't even are second wave guys with question marks that haven't performed particularly well. So internally, if you're having this conversation down in New York, and on my podcast there for The Athletic, the Razor Show this week, we talked about this with some of the guys down there from the Jets, Eric Coleman, my old teammate. And they're like, the underperforming group for the Jets is that offensive line. So that's where your mismatch is. Big day from Lawrence Guy. Big disruptive day from him. Big day from Danny Shelton. Seeing Adam Butler get in and get after it. Seeing the linebacking group maybe aligned inside over guards and using them to rush. I think they've got massive mismatches really at almost all 5 positions at some point throughout the day. I think you do that, you really make it very difficult for Le'Veon Bell to get anything going. And if Bell doesn't get going and you're having line issues, well, yeah, it's great that Darnold's back, but I think there's just too many leaky holes in the dam for him to have a difference that would swing it, past the 30-point lead that they had at one point. Sure, Darnold's good for maybe a score or two to sort of tighten that, but I think there's a massive gap between these two teams if you take advantage of that interior game mismatch for the D.
All right, well, it's that time in the show for Chatham's Choice. We'll get your betting pick. Patriots favored by 10 points in this one. The over-under 43.5. What are you going with?
Well, first of all, I have to apologize. We have to do this every week. We're 3-3 this year, folks. It pisses me off. It does, because last year we missed on two wagers the entire 16, the regular season, 14-2. We're blowing it out of the water. So now you're a 50-50 show, and if it's 50-50, you could just ask your grandmother, and she'd give you just as good information with a coin flip. So we're in the hole here a little bit, and we're going to fight out of it. We still got 10 more games to go. But in doing that, I'm going to stay away from dangerous lines. Actually, one of the losses this year was this Jets game where we're up 30. I told you to take the line. It was a great thing. I was out there on the internet searching for islands. I mean, things were good. But then you got the bad beat. You got those couple dirty things at the end. You had the Stidham pick six. They never put in the back of the quarterback. He does and throws a pick six, and then they have the fumbled punt for a touchdown. So the point of this is I think this thing's tightened a little bit. So I would be a little worried about that 10. There's been a 5-game, a 7-game, and a 14-game last 3 trips. I think I got that right in New York recently. So one that has been over that number, a couple that haven't, and it's a sort of team on the verge, and the Patriots are a little banged up in some important spots. So for that reason, I still think you're looking at a comfortable Patriots win. If it hits the line, I don't know. So I think it's much safer to just bet on the defense, because when you take unders, and that's my take here, when you take unders, who you're gambling on? You're gambling on the Patriots defense. You're gambling essentially that the Patriots defense is going to kick ass. And I think that's the safest bet of the game. So if I was going to place something where I really wanted to make a comeback here, I'd probably place it on them. So 43.5, I believe they'll be under that. I think the Patriots offense is good for a mid to high 20 score. And you're looking at the Patriots to keep them under, 12, 13 or lower. Less than 2 scores, and I think you're safely coming home with a victory here. We'll get back on track, because that's what we need, Kayla.
All right, I'll trust you this week, if you lead me astray again,
Yeah, so
I don't know.
When does my trust finally get burned through?
I liked that explanation, though, so I'll take it. Thanks, Matt. Keep it on NESN.com for all your Patriots news.